Hello?
Hi, Jason. How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
We had a little technical difficulty earlier, but we are going live
Why,
now.
okay, you're coming through a lot clearer than you were the last time.
Well, that hopefully that's a good sign then.
All right.
um, we're talking with Jason Offutt tonight. Jason is one of our favorite guests to have on. Jason is a novelist, paranormal researcher, and author of nonfiction books, as well as a journalism professor. So, how are you doing today?
I'm doing absolutely great. I'm doing terrific. The weather's been nice up here. Getting ready for school to start. Everything's kind of hectic, but it's fun.
Well, I don't know. It seems to be such an odd year as far as weather and so forth. I don't know about you guys up there, but down here, my lawn looks like it's mid-April, and we've been banding around the subject of cryptids, so just sort of the odd things in nature seem to kind of come together right now. Um, you have, I know you've covered that kind of subject before, and we're going to get to that. But for right now, let's talk a little bit about your writing projects that you have going on now.
Okay. Yeah, I'm actually working. I was working on this when you called. Working on a new novel. I'm kind of changing directions a little bit from the last one I wrote. I'm writing a young adult fantasy novel,
Oh, very cool.
and it's been a lot of fun. I've had to conjure up my memories of being a 13-year-old.
Oh no, that could be a little traumatic for most
Well, a little
people.
awkward maybe.
Well, I mean, that's a big departure from things you've done. Um,
Right? Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It has. I mean, nothing too spooky. I mean, last summer I get a lot of writing done in the summer because teaching. Teaching at a university, I've got summers off, which is fantastic. So I can spend time writing. And last summer I wrote a horror novel, so this is a little bit of a departure.
well, what your writing career has really kind of gone through phases: nonfiction, paranormal, to adult novels, and now this. What are sort of the unique challenges of writing for young adults?
Well, usually in my writing, I get away with dropping the f bomb. I can't do that. I'm expressing myself without cursing, so that's one. I think the main one is trying to see the eyes through a young teenager. I haven't been one of those for a while.
Oh, we don't have to tell on ourselves.
Yeah, so just I mean, um, seeing things from that perspective has been kind of tough, but it's been a challenge, but it's been a lot of fun.
One thing that I think maybe is more of a I could see as more of a challenge these days writing for young adults is that it's really a lot different being 13 now than when we were that age.
Right, right. Um, yeah, I couldn't carry a phone in my pocket at that point. They were connected to the wall, and they had a rotary dial on them. So there's just there are quite a few challenges, but it wasn't so. When we were younger, it wasn't so me all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I think social media has been absolutely awful for
Yes.
for children because they just they have to see their faces all the time on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, whatever they're using. That it's kind of taken younger people, I think, away from thinking about other people,
Mm-hmm.
which this is going to come back and hurt at some point, I think.
Well, and another thing that I've noticed, and for me, it's come up in my day job as an attorney, is that people say in their 20s and younger, they are so used to putting everything out there digitally, every detail, narrating their life, that they don't have a concept of covering their own ass even when they do stupid things.
Right.
You know, and it's not just that they don't think of it in that moment. It's like the concept of what I do may have repercussions just doesn't seem to come to mind near as often, or be a part of their thinking process too much.
Right. Well, yeah, I've noticed that. I've been teaching for starting my 12th year and teaching at a university, and the children, the students have changed in those 12 years. And when I lecture the introduction class, and I go to, I go through a little spiel on privacy, and I've always asked my students the question about, willingness to give up some of their privacy for more security. And there's been a distinct swing in the last 12 years of students going, no, my privacy's mine, to, yeah, I'll give anything up. It's a little bothersome.
Yeah, I mean, and that's been such a fundamental American view that, your individual privacy is so important that I'm not even sure if that age group understands what that really means.
No, I don't think so. Yeah, I agree with you.
So how do those kinds of changes in society affect how you're approaching your writing?
Well, that's a good question, because I don't know that it has. The characters that I have picked for the novel I'm working on, I've put them kind of outside that sort of, that sort of, inner, the being swamped with social media, so I don't really have to deal with it. I'm not sure I could.
I think that would be that would kind of drive me nuts as well. And
yeah, but one of the things I've told my students for the last few years, because they're always on their cell phones. I mean, sometimes in class, which is frustrating, and I deal with that. But as soon as they walk out of the classroom, it's boom, they're on their phones. And I've told my classes, I said, whenever a solar flare knocks out all of our communication satellites, you're going to be in the fetal position, drooling and crying on the floor. I'll try not to step on you.
Exactly. I have three sons, and particularly my older two are just exact opposites on those issues. My oldest, I think he would be in a fetal position. My second son, Benton, who's our tech director, I don't think it really bothers him too much. He is one kid that doesn't seem to, if he doesn't have his phone or whatever, it really doesn't affect him too much. So if the solar flare zombie apocalypse comes, he might survive, but I'm not sure about too many.
Well, he'll have to take care of his brother then, right?
Yeah, you'll have to lead him around. Yeah.
There's actually a psychologists have named this nomophobia, as in no mobile phone phobia, because there are some people, mostly young people, who are so used to being on the phone all the time. They have to be connected all the time. That if they don't have their phone, if it's taken away, if they lose it, if the battery dies, something, they have an anxiety attack. It's a type of anxiety disorder, which I've seen that. I've sometimes in my class I will make students give their phone up, and I had one girl a couple of years ago who really freaked out. Not a normal, my gosh, you're taking my phone, but she got the shakes. I gave it back to her. I didn't want anybody collapsing in my classroom.
Well, and it's amazing when you think, it hasn't been too many years ago that no one had phones, and yeah, I'm not sure what those repercussions are, but in kind of getting back to writing, what's the biggest difference you see between writing for that audience and writing for an older audience?
Well, it's the graphic nature of things because I like writing horror. Most of the short stories I write are horror stories, and um, there's blood. It's really really scary and creepy. And although there's some scary things that happen here, it's pretty tame by comparison. So
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can describe somebody something getting killed. In this case, I killed an ogre today. So it was dead, but I didn't go into gory detail about a sword being shoved through its eye or something like that.
Do you feel like there's in all of the political correctness and overprotective helicoptering parent um, climate that we're in that there's more of a pressure to make children's writing kind of bland?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I know I look back and when I was 10 or 12, I was reading Dean Koontz and Stephen King, um, and no one thought twice about it. And today, my parents would probably be turned into family services, though.
Probably King had some pretty
Mm-hmm.
pretty freaky stuff, and I don't mean the horror stuff too.
Yeah,
He had a lot of
psychological
odd sex stuff in there. Yeah.
sets and well, and just the psychological aspect. But and I guess in some ways it's good, some ways it's not. I think because it's kind of like the girl with her phone. Um, I've started reading a lot of articles that a lot of young adults are not functioning well as adults because they've never had to deal with anything. Even simple things as losing out on something because everyone's special and everyone gets the ribbon now. Um,
Right,
so,
and I've credited or I blamed the T-ball. I've blamed parents for the existence of T-ball
mm-hmm,
for this generation's problems because everybody participates, everybody wins, everybody gets a trophy. We don't keep score because everybody's good and special,
mm-hmm,
and the world is not like that. I've had so many more students come up to me and they're like, "Why did you give me a C?" I'm like, "Wait a second, I didn't give you anything. I gave you all the information that you needed to get a good grade. You didn't apply yourself. It's you that gave yourself a C."
mm-hmm.
But that has grown so much more, not taking responsibility for things. Now, and I can't use that as a blanket statement because there are a lot. I've had a lot of really great, conscientious, responsible kids who come through my program who get it.
Right.
And they understand that if they screw up, it's their fault. And they're the ones out there who they get good grades. They have two jobs outside of school, and they're going to be all right when they graduate. But there are a lot of other kids who they just don't get it.
And I think that when you say enjoying writing horror, that might make the job easier as time goes on because I think people are going to be scared by a lot more things easily.
Right, right.
Well, our
Well, and the whole political correctness that you mentioned, and at some point, I think it's going to swing back the other way. I mean, it has to. Um, I read an article, Charlotte, North Carolina. The school districts, the elementary schools are banned from saying boys and girls.
They're banned from what?
Kathy
Saying
just
boys
joined
and
us,
girls.
saying boys and girls.
What are they supposed to say?
Something gender neutral. They're people. They're not boys and girls. They're just people.
Wow.
And that absolutely that's insanity.
I guess we just refer to ourselves as androids now, maybe.
Maybe.
Androgynous.
Beings, that being.
Okay,
Yeah,
well,
I don't know. I was the kind of kid. I was not a. I was an ornery kid. I might have been, probably would have been the kid. You can't say boy and girl. You're not boys and girls. You're people. Oh, wait a second. You want to see? Yeah, I'm a boy.
yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure where people think this kind of thinking is going to take us, but it's kind of funny because talking about the political correctness, when we shift over and we talk about the flip side of our subject, the paranormal and cryptids and so forth, I even see that when you're discussing any sort of subject, that everything becomes politically correct, even something as ephemeral as the paranormal. And I really don't know where this is going to take us. I hope you're right that we swing back.
Well, there's got to be a point where common sense takes back over from the insanity that's run rampant the past 15, 20 years.
Either that or natural selection.
Well, what's going to happen? What is happening is, we our society is so PC.
Right.
When we're faced with something that is actually real, that's not PC, but is actually how the world works, we're going to get our ass kicked.
Yeah. Oh, I agree wholeheartedly. I've seen whole discussions on how do you refer to a ghost or a spirit.
It's referred to as paranormal correctness.
Paranormal correctness.
Yeah, nice.
We're going to have to put a disclaimer on this, because if people start talking like that, Jason and I are going to blame you.
Okay.
Well, it's
paranormal
just
correctness.
easy.
It's not a ghost. It's a spirit, disembodied
We
spirit.
don't want to. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I'm just going to say we don't want to offend our corporally challenged listeners.
That's correct. There's our term, corporally challenged listeners. Hopefully we have a couple chuckling over that. The disadvantaged ones, at least. We before we got started, Jason and I were talking about the article that you sent me about the Jersey
Devil.
Mm-hmm. And since we were talking about cryptids, for those listening, there's a new report, a photo out just this week in New Jersey of some animal that seems to be kind of running along the top of a wooden fence, and it appears to be hairless, and someone has claimed maybe this was the Jersey Devil. And if you Google it, I know you can find it. And then towards the end of the article, they state that the Oklahoma Department of Conservation, why they got involved, I don't know.
I don't know.
Said it was a black hairless squirrel. And
it's Oklahoma. The college football season hasn't started yet. They got to have something to do.
I guess so. Maybe it's a new running back. I don't know for the Sooners.
I've lived in New Jersey my whole life, and the only black squirrels I've ever seen are in New York City and Central Park. I've never seen a black squirrel anywhere in New Jersey. The only black squirrels I've ever seen in my life were in New York City and Central Park. So,
well, there are. I don't know about. I mean, in New Jersey. I mean, that's not all far, but there are black squirrels in Iowa. There's some. They've migrated south. We've got them here in the city where I live. They're not nearly as big as that one appears in the picture.
No,
so
they're
I'm
actually
dubious
smaller than gray squirrels.
That's what Jason was saying. That
yeah.
They're smaller than normal squirrels.
Yeah,
so.
They're smaller than gray squirrels.
And it just doesn't look proportioned like a squirrel to me.
No.
I was kind of like you, Jason.
Well, but then again, when an animal has the mange, it's take a Google. Do a Google image search on black bear with mange. It doesn't look like a black bear anymore whatsoever.
Well, and that's kind of what I feel, obviously it's got to be something like that, but I guess it raises the question is, were we dealing with a squirrel with mange 250 years ago?
Also, generally, animals without fur appear to be smaller than they do when they have fur, not larger. So, I mean, it just seems kind of funny to me, but, I mean, Lisa knows me, I'm a believer in cryptids. I'm a firm believer in cryptids. All of them, they pretty much have ever been created. I think there's a possibility that they could exist. I lived in New Jersey my whole life. I've spent time in the Pine Barrens. If you've never been there, you can't quite understand what it is. Mm-hmm. It's millions of acres of dense pine forest with narrow dirt roads that are maze that go through them, and you can get lost in there, you can get turned around in there. It's very scary in there. People, there's ghost towns. It's literally it's half or almost 2/3 the state of New Jersey.
Oh wow! I didn't realize that area is that big.
Yeah, and is pine forest. And so if you've ever been in there, you could understand where this type of urban legend could come into play. You hear noises, you hear sounds, you hear all kinds of. It's creepy, and so could there be some kind of mutated animal or something like that? I don't know, that lives there. I believe it's totally possible that it could live there and not be ever caught or found or shot. You can't hunt there. It's state park.
Well, now the flip side though, when you're talking about the Jersey Devil and Jason, I don't know if you know the origin of the legend, but it goes back to actually related to Benjamin Franklin. The story goes that I think the woman's name was Leedy.
Leeds, Mother Leeds.
Leeds, yeah. But it was reported, the episode where supposedly she gave birth and this creature was there, was reported in...
Well, this was like her 13th child, and she was giving birth. She said, this 13th child is going to be a devil. Mm-hmm. And then the child came out, and it had horse's hooves and bat wings, and it flew off.
Right. Well, an irony there is that the story was reported by Ben Franklin, and Miss Leeds' father-in-law was his major publishing competitor. And after this story, apparently his business tanked. And so there are some that discuss whether or not the story was sort of embellished as a means of getting the competitive edge, and maybe it really was, that's what it was. So, but then people kept having sightings for 200 years.
Yeah, that's kind of odd, and I don't necessarily put any stock in the original, the story, but I do believe that there's something creepy living out there.
What are your thoughts, Jason? Have you ever heard anything that would make you say that there is a devil in Jersey?
No, I mean I've read enough about the Jersey Devil. I mean it's a great legend, but it's a legend. It's fanciful and it's really cool. And is there the Jersey Devil living in the Pine Barrens like the legend says? Probably not. Is there something unknown and creepy as hell in the Pine Barrens? Yeah, probably so.
Yeah, I agree with you there.
Probably a few meth labs too, but yeah.
Well, yeah. Well,
that's what we have going in the national forest here in the Midwest. They build meth labs.
Yeah. Well, it used to be pop fields. Now it's meth labs. So.
Yeah.
You can hide lots of sins in the forest.
Yes, you can.
Right.
Whether it's Mrs. Leedy's offspring or something else. Jason, what do you think are some of the more credible cryptid possibilities?
Okay. Two right off the bat. The first one, I'm going to go to Australia because the thylacine, which was a marsupial wolf, it was also called the Tasmanian tiger, was hunted to extinction there were bounties on it because it was killing sheep. It was as big as a large dog, and it was killing sheep. So the government put a bounty on it, and hunters went after it like crazy and killed them all. The last one known living died in the Hobart Zoo in 1936, and people keep seeing them.
Oh, really?
Out in the wild. They keep seeing, this animal that meets the size, the description, and has, the distinctive stripes on its hindquarters like a tiger's. So, how can you say something was hunted to extinction like that? I mean, you can. It's done all the time, but people keep seeing it. I think eventually someone's going to shoot one or run over it with a car. And can you call that a cryptid? Because it's not an unknown animal, but it's one that's supposedly gone.
Right.
So I mean, I think that one, our old pal Bigfoot. This ranks up there with ghosts and UFOs with me. And let me explain that because that kind of sounded weird. Every single civilization on this planet, for as far back as we can go, as we have any history or legend with, as disconnected as we were, if we were, they've all had stories about UFOs or gods from the sky, ghosts of ancestors hanging around, and large, hairy, human-like creatures they either interacted with purposely or they fought with.
Right.
There are legends in all. Let me go back to Australia for gosh sakes. It's out there in the middle of the ocean when the Aborigines showed up. They have legends of the a race of big, huge, hairy people who were already there that they had wars with. So, I mean, if all of these disconnected civilizations have these same stories, there's got to be something to it. One of these days, somebody's going to shoot a Bigfoot, run over one with a truck. I don't know. It's gonna, wander out in the middle of Yankee Stadium during a ball game. Something, I don't know. But that one, I really am seriously positive is going to be discovered at some point. And for what it is,
I agree.
Is it an
I
ape?
really agree with you there.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. I mean, there's so many stories about it's possibly an ape or it's just a huge man-like figure. Its face looks like a man. I don't know what it is, but I think we'll find out. Okay, I'm sorry, I yapped over you.
No, you're fine. You're fine. No, I agree with you because, and that's one thing I've always, it's sort of a litmus test for me too, is if you have the same legends all over the world from all these, disconnected societies, then there's got to be something more than just someone had an imaginative tale 10,000 years ago. And what becomes interesting to me is that the sort of the legends around Bigfoot seem to be growing and changing. That it's spirit, that it's related to ETs, that kind of thing. I'm not so sure I can quite go there, but and I'm not sure why people are taking it.
And that's what I can't go there either. And I hear all this stuff. Yeah, it's a spirit. It travels in underground tunnels. It's an extraterrestrial. It's an extraterrestrial pet. I mean, that's using a bunch of unknowns to explain another unknown. Let's just say that there's something big and hairy that is reported in every corner of the world that we know of except Antarctica. And let's just, when we find it, we'll decide what the heck it is. But just say that there is something out there.
I think one of the things that you hear so much is that, well, we haven't found any remains, or almost an arrogance of how could they be so smart to avoid us so well, but I think that may be tied back to the early legends of early civilizations having wars with these kind of races, that perhaps they've decided to remain reclusive to avoid further violence.
Oh, we're mean people. We really are. I'd avoid us.
Well, yeah. I mean, just ask the natives in the Caribbean when Columbus got here.
Yeah.
Or just across the world, any indigenous people when Europeans showed up.
Exactly. But and I always, I'm a firm believer in our own arrogance. I think we, as a species, we get so arrogant that we would have been able to find them by now. But if they are similar intelligence and
You know where I stand on it. I believe that they're out there, and I believe that they're a lot more common than people think they are. And I think that we're just we're so used to seeing things that are right in front of our face and things that we already know that we don't see a lot of what's around us. And I think that's part of why Bigfoot hasn't been really discovered yet.
That's something. One of my all-time favorite authors, Douglas Adams, the guy who wrote Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, posed in one of his books the somebody else's problem theory. That if the more outrageous something is, that you can sit it in the middle of a large city and no one will see it at all, because if you don't see it, it's somebody else's problem. It's not yours, and you don't have to deal with it.
It's very close to the theory that I have. I've never heard that before, but yeah, I talk about that a lot in a lot of our podcasts. That ancient people could see things so much better than we could because they were used to looking at the world around them. They were used to. Our world is right in front of our face. Our world is our, TV set, our computer screen, the people that we know in our small circles, and we just don't look.
Well, and I think as society grew and got more interconnected and more complicated, we just filter more out.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and that's one of the things that I grew up. I grew up on a farm at a time to where we had 5 TV channels, one being PBS, the other being the religious channel. So I usually watch 3.
Same here.
I was outside all the time. We didn't have a computer. I finally got an Atari 2600 at one point, but I went from that to being a journalist, a working journalist for 17 years, and that was my job, was to pay attention to things. So I see stuff all the time. I notice things, and I'm in class talking about my reporting class is talking about how to pay attention, and I point out all these things about people, and they're like, "How the hell do you know that?" Hey, one student, I was talking about these students, just things I noticed. One kid, I said, "You hang your sweaters up in the closet." He's like, "Guys got huge." He's like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "You don't hang, you don't fold them and put them on top of the shelf. You don't put them in a drawer. You hang them in the closet." Well, he had the little dimples on his shoulders of his sweater, the sweater he was wearing, and it's just, it's paying attention to little things. And you're absolutely right. People today do not do it. They have their face buried in screens all the time.
Well, that's why you hear all the time, whether it's a murder investigation or a Bigfoot sighting or whatever, about credible witnesses and trained observers.
Right.
Because depending on what you do in life, you have to be more observant of details, and it makes a big difference. Just like you as a reporter, me as an attorney, you have to pay attention to all those little tells and how people carry themselves, etc., to give you information you need. And most people don't pay attention to those things.
Well, I think if
everybody... Well, incredible witnesses, this always brings me to... I've heard this in I don't know how many interviews, that the FAA doesn't consider pilots credible witnesses whenever they report a UFO. But what? That's all they do is stare into the sky. Of course they're credible witnesses.
Who else is going to better know what's supposed to be up there?
Exactly.
Well, I think there are political agendas behind all that, personally, myself. But... did you hear
political
today?
Political agendas behind everything.
Did you hear that today the CIA released 10,000 pages of documents related to UFO investigations?
I did not hear that.
Yeah.
I'm always up to date on the news. I have to be because I teach journalism, but during the summer I completely shut down.
Yeah, I saw it. I actually shared it, but and it kind of hinted at maybe that they're going to release some more in groups. I thought that was.
I'll have to look that up because that's exciting. I hope it's not all redacted.
Well, yeah, it very well could be. I mean, some pages will be redacted with everything but A, N, and the, pretty much. But
right.
Yeah. So it will be interesting to see what's in there. Kind of getting back to Bigfoot, you talking about being seen in all over. We actually we know a very credible witness in Northeast Oklahoma. We won't mention his name because he doesn't really want to make it known yet, but very, very credible with what the man does for a living, etc. Who's seen Bigfoot hominids in the chat piles in the mining district even. Not in forest, etc., or swamp or whatever. And so it really makes you wonder how close they come to civilization.
Well, I've had some odd things happen on my property. I send you pictures and videos occasionally, and I go, I'm not saying that I have any idea what caused this. All I'm saying is this is weird.
Right.
And I don't know what. I have a burn pile. Just about a month ago, I sent Lisa some pictures, and some of the big pieces of wood were thrown well off of the burn pile all the way into the path that I walk on. Good 15 feet. Large pieces of wood. And many of them were thrown, and I have no explanation to what. It wasn't like that the day before.
Right.
So I don't know, and I walk those trails every day, almost every day, and I know my property very well. And so I took a video of it and sent to Lisa. I said, I have no explanation as to how these logs got thrown out of this wood pile all the way into the trail. But
so
weird.
I mean, Jason, have you heard of any instances where Bigfoot type creatures seem to be more curious about what we're doing, getting a little closer to town type things?
Yes, I've talked to people who have reported seeing a Bigfoot digging through a dumpster in a small town in Colorado. That's pretty close. There have been Bigfoot reports from St. Joseph, Missouri. Let's go back more to my neck of the woods here. St. Joseph, Missouri, and Creve Coeur, Missouri, which is what am I talking about? You know what I'm talking about. Creve Coeur, followed by St. Louis, which is a suburb. Right, but these both they're cities. They're lots of people. I mean, St. Joe at least has got 78,000. Creve Coeur is a suburb of St. Louis, but they both have one thing in common.
Lakes.
They're right next to a river.
And like Creve Coeur has a fairly good sized lake, and I actually lived in Creve Coeur going to law school. So yeah, they do have bodies of water, and that makes sense. Now our mutual friend, when he's seen them down in Northeast Oklahoma, he said a couple of times he's seen them walking along railroad tracks, and I thought, well, in a way, that would be a good trail, just like a game trail in the mountains. But
it's true.
But it seems odd to me that that suddenly they're making themselves seen that much. Or
yeah, but then again, think other than the railroad tracks that you might see driving past, how much of a railroad system do you see?
That's true. It is pretty much.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah, I've taken a I took an Amtrak train from Mineola, Texas to San Antonio once, which is a 10-hour drive. They stopped way too damn much. But I saw so much country that there weren't roads around.
Right.
So I mean, there's lots of wilderness train tracks cut through. So I have no doubt that a Bigfoot could use a train track as some sort of a thoroughfare.
Well, that's true. They probably could and stay out of sight quite a bit.
Yeah, definitely.
But it does make you wonder if
there's tons of abandoned railroad tracks too around the country. Tons of them.
Yeah, so that would be a natural, and depending on what their food sources are, that they're probably using those trails as well.
Well, yeah. I mean, animals use the trails. Like just the trails on my property, I know the animals use them.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to take the easiest route.
Mm-hmm. Where do you think it's more credible that the stories that you get from the Northwest, or say Florida and the skunk ape, or do you think is there a commonality that makes them more credible?
Yeah, that's a good question. The thing about the Bigfoot in different parts of the country, they're different creatures. Have you? I mean, the reports of the skunk ape,
Mm-hmm.
which isn't just in Florida. It's down in that corner, southeast corner. It seems to be more of an orangutan type creature. There are different parts of the country where Bigfoot reports sound more like big chimps.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are, the classic ones from, the Pacific Northwest that seems more prevalent in the country. They sound different all over the world. I mean, the Yowies in Australia is similar but different. The orang pindak is similar but smaller and orange. And the Yeti is traditionally described as smaller than what we think of as Bigfoot. So, I mean, there's different types of people. Why wouldn't there be different types of Bigfoot all over the world?
Oh, I
so,
agree.
Yeah.
Here's sort of throwing something out there that you see a lot about, and then it's poo-pooed a lot, but the findings of the giant skeletons. And I've often wondered about how that relates to Bigfoot. And I kind of dismissed a lot of that for a long time until a few years ago, the Smithsonian they ended up having to admit in a lawsuit that they actually had remains of hundreds of these giant skeletons in the early 1900s, and that they destroyed them.
Now, my big question is, why in the hell didn't I know that?
See, it's always interesting when we talk, Jason.
Oh my gosh, it sure is. Yeah, because I've been fascinated by the by the giant stories for a long time, of all the 9-foot bodies with 2 rows of teeth that were found buried in mounds, and found in the Grand Canyon, and there's stories here in Missouri of giants with 2 rows of teeth being found in a buried city underneath Moberly, Missouri.
Yeah.
There's stories like this like crazy, and I absolutely love them. And I didn't know about the lawsuit.
Yeah.
I've let myself down.
Yeah, I don't recall the name of it off the top of my head, but someone had sued for disclosure of the information, because there were so many accounts of people having sent the skeletons to the Smithsonian for research, and then they never hear about it, and then they say they never received it and everything, and someone filed a lawsuit, and I want to say it's probably 6 or 7 years ago, and it went on for 2 or 3 years, and they finally ended up admitting that they'd had hundreds of remains, and they were destroyed, and it kind of, the impression that the opinion left was it was done so because they were too afraid that they would have to rewrite the history books so much that they were afraid of the repercussions.
How
100 years ago.
How much does that happen, though? Honestly,
probably more than we want to know.
Really, it's disturbing.
Okay, there was an archaeologist, a Mexican archaeologist, was I don't remember what part of Mexico she was excavating, but she found a human habitation site that she dated to 45,000 years ago, and this was back in the late 70s, early 80s, maybe. It's been a while since I read the article, but she was, excited, because she was positive that this, 45,000 years ago, completely overturned the Clovis theory of 13,000 years ago of people coming over on the land bridge.
Mm-hmm.
She was totally discredited.
Yeah.
Because it didn't fit in to the accepted academic, structure of the Clovis people. So there are things like this that are discovered all the time that are either, just completely swept under the rug, or that the people who found them are discredited. And it's sad, but it's kind of understandable given human nature because science has based itself in history. Historians have based themselves on these are the facts. And if they've written books about it and papers about it, and somebody comes along to show that they're wrong, they don't want that.
Well, no, they don't. Instead of just taking the position of, well, based upon new evidence, it's changed. But that's very true. But in what I found is a lot of academics in particular, and I see this with historians as well as archaeologists and others, that they really it almost becomes a religion, a belief system for them, and so that if the facts are found out to be wrong later, it's almost as trying to convince someone that their faith is inaccurate. And it's a shame because the truth suffers often for a very long time.
It's true, and then they take things like those bones and destroy them, so that it's never discovered. To me, it's just terribly disturbing.
I think
but that's the world we live in.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's going to change anytime soon.
No, but I think that is one reason that, particularly over time, that a lot of the important discoveries are often made by, quote, non-professionals, non-professional researchers, because they tend not to so readily be bound by what the discipline has said for the last 100 years.
Hopefully, with the advent of social media and camera phones and people being able to publicly, express these things, that we can undo that in our future. That trend.
I don't see that happening.
Yeah, I wrote it. I do write pieces right now. I'm on a 50-part piece that I'm writing for Mysterious Universe.
Cool.
On Cryptids in America. But I wrote something for them about a year, maybe 2 years ago, about this very thing, about science and the paranormal.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody out there searching for things, searching for ghosts, searching for Bigfoot, whatever, science isn't going to believe until they can figure it out.
Right.
I mean, somebody might have coolest EVP ever, or whatever readings they have, or whatever devices they're using, whatever photographs that are taken that are, seriously, this is proof, inexplicable proof right here. I've got it. If scientists don't do it themselves, they're not going to take it seriously, which is, again, goes back to hitting Bigfoot with a car.
Yeah.
Gotta have a body and something substantial, and there's not enough scientists out there willing to bite the bullet of ridicule. I mean, some are. Mm-hmm. Dr. Jeff Meldrum from, I think, the University, Utah State, maybe.
I think so, yeah.
Who's convinced Bigfoot's out there. Good for him. Get out there and do something about it. He is. And we just need more of that. I'm not trying to belittle non-academic researchers. It's just I'm in academia and I know how people think.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree with you there. And the flip side of that is, even with social media and things like that, so that people can get stuff out there for people to look at. I think what you're really seeing is, because of the troll phenomena, it's getting to where people are less likely to share evidence online anyway, because it doesn't, as you said, it could be the Holy Grail, and they're going to get trolled so badly that a lot of people just say it's better that I keep it in my database and not deal with the lunacy of putting it out there on the internet.
Right. Well, there's that, and the fact that let's go to photographic evidence. I'm a photographer. I was a professional newspaper photographer for a while, and I love pictures, and I could be out there, and I could snap a candid picture of Bigfoot taking a whiz in the woods. All right, I could do that, and I would know what I saw, what I took a picture of, proof that he exists. But you know what? I'm not that great at Photoshop, but I'm good enough to fake something.
Yeah.
And there's way too many people much better than I am. So for one, this is sad. I can't trust photographic evidence, whether it be still or video. I can't trust that anymore because there are so many people out there and so many programs so readily available to make great looking fakes that pictures don't matter.
Well, about the only option is if Polaroid starts making Polaroids again, and researchers start clicking those.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it really is hard. I mean, and yes, you can have analysis done to prove whether or not it's been altered, but the cost of that is prohibitive in most instances. So
people are still not going to be convinced, even if they say that it's proven that it wasn't a fake. People are still going to go, yeah, they're wrong.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, everyone's the expert.
Yeah. And we've seen it with just stuff that we've put out on the internet. I mean, we have some really good video that we put out there that it's really hard to say that it's not real.
Something.
And people still say, "Oh, it's whatever." It's so frustrating to us because we're like, "No, how would you fake that? It's a video, first of all. It's not like a still photo, but anyway, it just frustrates me.
You just can't worry about that. If you put it out there, you can't worry about it.
Yeah, I know.
But it is. It's really hard. And then I think there's also the factor that most people don't want the mysteries solved anyway.
Yeah, there's a lot of people.
Well, that's the old argument about about JPL sending Jet Propulsion Laboratory being the one in charge of sending probes to Mars. They're not the conspiracy theories. They're not looking for life. That's not what they're designed for. So they don't want to find life because they're out of a job.
Right. Well, I mean there's a that mentality, that we humanity loves mysteries, and so if you solve some of these fundamental mysteries, we have to go find new ones.
Well, we're a story-oriented society. We like a good story.
Speaking of good stories, what are some of the other cryptid possibilities you find fascinating?
Oh yeah, living dinosaurs. I just listened to a podcast today with a guy who's been searching Mokele Mbembe for the last 12 years. And the thought of living dinosaurs being out there fascinates me. Are there? Probably not. But you know what? There have been so many eyewitness accounts. Well, let's go here in the United States. There are so many accounts from Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Utah, even some on the East Coast in mountainous areas of pterodactyls, petrodons, of these flying reptiles.
Now, I have heard a couple of those.
What?
I have heard a couple of those stories of like pterodactyls and so forth.
Right, and there are a lot of those stories in Africa and Malaysia and other places in the world. And in Africa, the Mokele Mbembe is it's a sauropod dinosaur. That's the description. There are tribes that have been been sheltered from our Western culture and people will go in there, scientists or not scientists, but explorers will go in there to talk to them about this creature, and they'll show pictures. Is it an elephant? Is it a rhino? Is it a hippo? Is it this? Is it that? And then they'll get to a sauropod dinosaur, and the people will point, and they'll be like, "Yeah, this is it." So I mean, there are places on this planet, which gets back to Bigfoot. Even in this country, there are places that people don't go. They've not been.
Right.
And there could be anything still living. And if there are a couple Jurassic Park type critters still living out there in the remote corners of the world, and that I think is fascinating. And yeah, I don't give it a very huge chance, but I do give it a chance.
Well, when what was it, the Celia camp was discovered, and they thought it had been extinct for 60 million years, that kind of thing.
That's what I was just going to bring up.
Yeah, and a guy who saw it, the scientist was in Southeast, I think it was Southeast Asia. It was Southeast Asia, I believe, and he saw it in a fish market.
Yeah,
he's like, wait a second, I know what that is. And now there have been populations found, in Southeast Asia and off the coast of South Africa. So, yeah, that's the benchmark case that people who think there may be living dinosaurs out there use, because, damn it, it happened once.
exactly.
It can happen another time.
Well, and actually, some of the most interesting evidence ever found as far as Bigfoot creatures were teeth or etc. in some of the markets in Asia. Mm-hmm. Back in the 40s and 50s, I believe. And so, they were looking, is it like a Yeti, or is this like a missing link, or what? So, yeah, it's hard to know what could be out there.
Yeah. Like you said, it happened once. And there's areas like the rainforest in South America and in the jungles in Africa. There's places that people, like you said, they just don't go.
Yeah.
There could be a lot of things there. They find new species all the time. Mm-hmm. Why can't they find a species that already existed?
Well, exactly.
Right. And let's look at something else. Let's look at evidence of these things. There are petroglyphs in the American Southwest of what look like Tyrannosaurus, Allosaurus type dinosaurs. The big meat eaters with the short forearms and the big thick back legs. Mm-hmm. I'm sure you guys have probably seen this. It's a famous picture on a pillar in I believe Cambodia. I think it's an ancient temple in the jungle in Cambodia.
Angkor Wat.
There's a picture of a Stegosaurus.
Yeah.
And people, scientists in the past have brushed off all these, legends of dragons and pictures like this as being, some sort of internal, natural fear of reptiles is why we conjure these things up, or that they've seen dinosaur bones, which I call bullshit on both of those.
Yeah.
Can I say bullshit?
Sure.
I just said bullshit.
We're on the internet, so yeah.
I said it. I shouldn't have asked that way because I said it 3 times. But if you've seen the the bones of fossilized dinosaurs, they don't have the structure of what these pictures depict.
Right.
I mean, they're all laying flat. But I mean, the Stegosaurus. I mean, that's a freaking Stegosaurus.
Yeah, it's very clear that it's a Stegosaurus, and they're hunting it with their spears.
Yeah. Well, another thing, a good example of that is, and I forget, it was one of the first British paleontologists, when they found some of the first dinosaur bones down by the Dover Cliffs, and I forget which one it was. Iguanodon. They assembled it one way, and it made it look like almost a large iguanodon, and then later they figured out that was all wrong, and it was basically a duck-billed dinosaur. So how they had depicted it was totally different. So
Well, that's why we don't have brontosauruses anymore. The brontosaurus was my favorite dinosaur as a kid.
Oh yeah, I love how it doesn't exist. Yeah.
Yeah, they put the skeleton together wrong. So yeah, that never existed. It's an Apatosaurus.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, but either anyway, where do you find dinosaur bones? They're buried underneath a lot of rock.
Mm-hmm.
So the ancient man didn't just wander through the desert, and find dinosaur bones. No, so it's where I mean the Ica stones.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people poo-poo those like crazy, but as being a fake. But the guy who quote unquote discovered them, he couldn't have faked this stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, they were anatomically. No, I don't mean that part, but they were correctly carved dinosaurs in these rocks interacting with people.
Mm-hmm.
That absolutely floors me. That sort of stuff convinces me.
And it is. I just think it's a fear, such a fear of revisionism that it has to be something else. But I'm glad you brought up dragons because I've always been fascinated by that subject because there's such a similar depiction around the world, whether it be in China, Japan, Mesoamerica.
Well, I think it's the Pisca, maybe Piscia, Native American dragon from around the Missouri, Iowa area, not Iowa, but Missouri, Illinois area.
Yeah,
they have a dragon as well.
And it just, I just find it hard to believe that people's imagination are very fertile, and usually you that's why different cultures are dissimilar, but certain things are so much alike that tells me that there's a fact of truth in it.
Yeah, well, I just think they're a dinosaur that existed.
Yeah. I want to ride one so bad.
Oh, now that would be cool.
I've ridden an elephant. I've ridden an elephant in a camel at a zoo. I want to ride it. I want to ride an Apatosaurus.
There you go. Yep.
I'm going to pat it and call it a good boy.
I just hate to have to feed it. Okay. Now we know Jason's favorite dinosaur. What's your favorite cryptid?
Oh, you got a favorite cryptid? There's so many. I love cryptids so much.
Me too.
I mean, I got to go with Bigfoot because I mean that's the one I think. That's the one I think has other than a known animal, the thylacine, like I was talking about. Other than that, I think Bigfoot has got the best chance of us finding one.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I really do. And then there's so many that seem to be sort of it's like representative almost of a cryptid and spirit at the same time. Especially a lot of the Native American tales, things like that. And I just really not sure what to think about all of that.
Like the Wendigo. I was talking to somebody about a Wendigo the other day. Because they were from Canada, and that's usually depicted as a Bigfoot type creature, but it's a spiritual type thing too, because humans can turn into Wendigos if they've resorted to cannibalism and their spirits turn bad.
Right.
Then they turn into these, these big, hairy, but still wraith-like creatures that feed upon human flesh. So I mean, it's a lot of this stuff's tied together. I mean, there's not a unified theory of paranormal yet, but I've found in researching this stuff over the years that I've done it is a lot of this stuff is connected, and we just don't know it.
Well,
this guy think a lot alike.
Yeah, same here. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I've felt that way for a long time too. I kind of liken it to the unified theory in physics. The search for it. There's just so much overlap. I was reading an article the other day. They discovered a a skeleton on I just went blank on the mountain in Greece that was supposed to be the birthplace of Zeus, and it.
They found a sacrifice.
Yeah, but what was really
Olympus? Are you talking Olympus?
No, it's another one that was actually where he was supposed to be born. But there was a large Zeus cult there for a long time, and they found remains that indicate a young man, and that was probably a sacrifice. But in the course of them talking about it, part of the beliefs that surrounded the Zeus cult there were the followers were believed to often turn into basically werewolves. And I'd never heard that connected to the ancient Greeks before. I thought that was interesting.
Well, there was I'm trying to think. There's a Greek legend. Gosh, I used to know this, but it was was it a Greek king, maybe, who tried to kill his family and was cursed by the gods to turn into a wolf and eat human flesh. I can't remember anymore.
I think I vaguely remember that, but this was that the worshipers in this cult would turn into werewolves, and I thought that was really interesting. Not just one of the on a mythological level, but that the practitioners supposedly turned into wolves, and especially related to Zeus, because as far as I recall, wolf wasn't any of a symbol for Zeus. So I just thought that was really interesting. You have some of those common themes in different societies. Shape-shifting, for instance.
I was just going to ask him what his opinion was
everywhere.
on shapeshifters.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just agreeing that shape-shifting is in every single culture across the planet. I mean, in Central America, there's shape-shifting to jaguars. There's shape-shifting to. We've got the skinwalkers in North America. We've got there are shark wear people and dolphin wear people across the world. So yeah, that's common. It's fascinating. I don't know why it's common, but it's fascinating.
I think psychologists probably would say our fear of losing control of ourselves, but
they say lots of stuff.
That's true. That's a whole nother show.
Yeah.
So, aside from cryptids, what do you think is in the paranormal realm has a possibility of being proven?
Oh, yeah, that's an absolute great question. And I have an answer, and it's similar to my Bigfoot answer, but before I say it, I will poo-poo everything else. Ghosts, shadow people, black-eyed kids, demons, all of that jinn, all of that stuff will never be proven by science. Mainly because of the fact that the scientific method calls for repeatability. Mm-hmm. And you're not going to be able to get a ghost to show up at the exact same time, in the exact same conditions, every time the scientist wants it to. It's not going to show up in the lab all the time. So they're not going to be able to study it the same way. It's not going to be repeatable, and they can't capture it. We're not Ghostbusters. So, ghosts and anything spiritual like that, I think that's completely out the window.
Yeah, unless we.
However, go ahead.
I'd say unless we come up with a completely different understanding of quantum physics or something, yes. Right.
Yeah, something's got to change for that to happen. But UFOs, extraterrestrial visitors, vehicles, if those things are grabbed a hold of and put out in front of the public, whether by a news crew or it's got to be by a news crew. It can't be social media. That'll get poo-pooed and sucked up. If a news crew if they're the first ones to arrive at a UFO crash, and it goes immediately on air, that's probably the second best chance of getting something paranormal accepted by the world.
Well, I can say if I found a UFO crash, I would be calling every reporter I know before I would call the military or law enforcement. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because otherwise, you'll never see it again.
Yeah.
Have you ever had any encounters? Or
UFO?
Yeah.
Yes and no. I won't count it as an encounter. I was about 15 years old. Grew up on a farm. Dad, it was planting season, so he came in really late. It was probably about 10:30, and he didn't come in. And my mom said, Jason, go outside and check on your dad. So I went out there, and he was leaning against the side of his pickup, staring into the sky. And it was a clear night, not a cloud at all. Living out in the country, oh my gosh, the sky is so black, the stars are so bright. I miss that a lot. And I asked him what he was doing, and he pointed to a spot in the sky that was kind of between, we had a field in between us and the next house. It was probably a mile between us and the next house. And he pointed to a spot above the field, and I looked, and there was a black hole punch. It looked like a hole punch in the sky. It was just black. And he said, shh, just listen. And I was quiet, and there was a hum. And I said, I gotta go get Mom. So I went and got Mom, and we all three of us witnessed this. And when we were outside, just staring at this thing in the sky, this black thing, the phone rang. So I ran back in the house, and it was, by that point I was in high school, so this was a mobile phone you could take off the base and walk for a while with. So I walked into the door, and I could still see the thing in the sky, and it was our neighbor from across the field. And he's like, do you see this thing? He had seen it as well.
Right.
And I told him, yeah, and described it, and he was like, yeah, that's exactly what I'm seeing. I hear the hum too. Hung the phone up, went back outside, and we just stood there for the next probably 25, 30 minutes until it rose, is I guess the best thing I can think of, until it disappeared in the sky. That is the closest thing to a UFO encounter that I have.
Have you, Kathy?
Oh yeah, I did one time. I was just driving home up the highway in Pennsylvania, and I was on a busy highway in a very urban area, and there was just this bright light hovering over houses, maybe 1,000. I'm not good at feet or distance. It wasn't way up in the sky. It was pretty low, but it was higher than treetops. But and it's just hovering there, and so I'm looking at it, and it's right over top of houses and right off the highway. But there was two helicopters that were flying around it, so it definitely was not a helicopter. I mean, it didn't look anything like the helicopters that it was just one light that was hovering there, and then something dropped out of it, and it looked like it fell all the way to the ground. And I was sure that thousands of people had to have seen the same thing that I saw. It was a highway, and neighborhood. But I told my parents about it when I got home, and I thought there'd be something in the paper about it the next day or whatever. There was never anything about it, so I don't have any explanation of what it was.
I had one experience, and I was a senior in high school, and I was driving on a 2-lane highway north of Joplin, actually going to pick up a friend. We were going to go bowling. It was summertime. It was hot. It was late afternoon, and I start seeing something coming towards me, flying towards me on the highway, and there's no other cars out. And at first I figured, it's a helicopter or something. And as it gets closer, it's, I almost hate to say it, but it's almost the stereotypical saucer description of two saucers inverted on each other, and with in the middle a flat area like a band between them. And it approached, and I stopped the car, and it stopped probably 150 yards in front of me, and it was hovering about 50 feet over the road, and it pretty much was the width of about the roadbed and the right-of-way, so probably 35 feet across. And the flat area, there was like two bands, and they were rotating opposite directions. And I rolled down my window, turned the engine off. There's absolutely no sound, no engine, no exhaust, nothing. And I'm thinking it's some sort of military project. At the time, there were active missile silos about 15 miles away. So, you know, as Jason can tell you, in Missouri, there's bases, lots of missile silos. I didn't think much about it. I thought, oh, must be they're testing something. And then in a minute, a light comes out and hits the road bed, and I'm just really wondering what's going to happen. And then suddenly it takes off at about a 45-degree angle and literally goes from stationary to completely out of sight in a fraction of a second. And
so you actually saw a flying saucer?
I guess as I was watching it, I figured it was a government, some sort of test vehicle. But I've never seen anything move that way.
It could be, but it could be. I went to college at Central Missouri State University, which they've changed their name now, but in Warrensburg, which was, it's really close to Whiteman Air Force Base.
Yeah.
And what you said about the missile silos, they were all over the place.
Oh yeah.
And I was driving from Warrensburg to Sedalia once on US 50, and a week before I had seen a news program, probably 60 Minutes, about the stealth bomber. So when I pulled over to watch this thing I saw in the sky, if I hadn't seen that news program, I would have thought the aliens were there to get me.
Yeah.
So, you might have seen something otherworldly, or, you might have seen something we still haven't used yet.
Well, if so, there's absolutely no engine or exhaust noise, but it was the acceleration was just, literally from filling the roadbed to not being able to see a speck in less than a second. And even as it accelerated, no wind, no distortion, no sonic boom, nothing. So if it is, they're hiding a lot. But it's those kinds of things that really, you have to wonder. Yes, there's a lot of technology that we have that the public doesn't know about, but you have to wonder at times.
Yeah. Yeah, and then, I'm curious to find out what your opinion is of time travel, because sometimes my theories of a lot of the UFO sightings are folds in time. Things that we're seeing that we haven't seen yet, that we might see in the future. I don't know. That's one of my theories about some of the UFO things.
Which is as valid as the next person's. Since the very first time I saw a time travel episode on the original Star Trek TV show when I was a kid, I've been fascinated by time travel. I still am absolutely hooked on it. And I've interviewed tons of people who've had I'm convinced that they've had real, not time machine type experiences, but time slips.
Mm-hmm.
So, is there a veil somewhere between, between times that opens up? Sometimes it's so thin that we pass through it. I think one of the most famous famous cases was in England. A guy was flying, an RAF pilot was flying, and he went to land at this this field that there was a base that was there that didn't look like the base was supposed to look like. The planes were painted a different color. The people working on them were wearing different colored uniforms. And he turned around and went back, and when he finally circled back to the base, everything was normal. But a couple of years later, the RAF changed the colors of their planes to what he had seen, and they changed the colors of their uniforms to what he'd seen. Now, that's a well documented case, and there are a ton of those. So I mean, time travel, yeah, I'd love to think it's real. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we did a podcast a while back about time travel, and we cited a lot of historical cases of anomalies that have happened. Reported some different kinds of stories you can find if you look it up on the internet. That throughout time, but even if you go back to ancient history, you'll find where ancient people reported seeing things were described as airplanes. It looked very similar to what we have now as an airplane or
a rocket
or a pilot, an astronaut with a helmet.
I'm sorry, but look at the carvings. Look at the carvings on the temple at Abydos. Have you seen those?
Yes.
There's a freaking helicopter, an Apache helicopter.
Yeah.
That's 3,000 years old.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely.
So it's either time travel or ancient aliens or something. There has to be something to explain it.
Well, I mean, we do have the cases of aircraft that go missing. Where did they go? I believe that things just don't disappear. They have to go somewhere. People don't just disappear. They have to go somewhere. So, I don't know. That's sort of my theory on some of the UFO. I mean, I'm not a big firm believer that we have aliens visiting planet Earth. I think we're very small in our universe, and we're very small in space, and I think we're kind of narcissistic to think that anybody really cares about us. So,
well, I think it's likely that they may just be looking for resources or anything, checking out a lot of planets.
Yeah, it could be. I mean,
surveys, basically.
I'm definitely not discounting.
Well, you know what? I think it's more for entertainment purposes. They like to see the smart monkeys fight.
We fight a lot. Shore show of the space.
No more than Jerry Springer show.
The Jerry Springer show of
space.
Yeah, I shouldn't have called it smart. We are the intergalactic Jerry Springer show. Absolutely.
Well, I think I kind of look at a lot of paranormal activity in the same vein. I think a lot of times what's actually happening is that you have different points in time bumping up against each other. And so if that happens, I think time travel definitely is something that's feasible, and it may be something that can happen accidentally or under certain conditions, not necessarily that someone has to create a time machine.
Right. No, I agree. I think a time machine would be wonderful, but I don't know that it's necessarily something that, when it happens, it's something that's controlled.
Well, yeah. And, and the more...
I own it.
Huh?
Go ahead.
No,
go ahead. I can save this for a second.
Mm-hmm. No, go ahead.
Oh, I own a time machine.
You do?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Wouldn't you like to visit certain points in history?
Well, yeah.
Yeah. Well, there are lots of places I'd like to go see. Lots of times I'd like to go see. Lots of things.
He wants to go ride that dinosaur.
Yeah. That never existed.
This has been about 5 years ago now. A couple of professors I'm friends with in the chemistry and physics department, and I were discussing time travel one night over a couple of beers, which is the great thing about teaching at a university. You can have beers with physicists. That's awesome. Anyway, we were talking time travel, and I talked about this time machine that you can buy, and they're like, "We got to do it. We got a grant."
Oh God!
I shit you not. We got a grant. And we bought this time machine. Have you heard of Stephen L. Gibbs?
No.
It sounds vaguely familiar.
All right, I think he lives in Kansas now, but there's a farmer in Nebraska who was visited by himself from the future.
Oh, I have heard of that,
Himself
yes.
from the future, gave him plans to build a time machine, and he builds them and he sells them on the internet. Well, we bought one. And you know what? It takes 3 minutes to warm up, and you do all these, things to the machine. You got to put crystals in it and rub it a certain way. And in 3 minutes, it's supposed to work. And I discovered that, I've traveled 3 minutes in the future every time I use it.
I like that.
How much does one of these cost?
It was like $250.
Wow.
Well, what do you expect for $250?
Well, right, and all the parts were from Radio Shack.
It'd be hard to replace those because you have to go back in time.
Yeah. I'll go back and buy stock in Radio Shack.
They might not have gone out of business if it had worked.
Exactly.
I have to agree. I think that concept is just something that is fantastical and
I think it's great story writing.
It is, but I think there is science behind it too.
Definitely, but the theory that you can move forward in time, but not backwards. Is that what it was? Like you can.
Some say that, but then quantum physics says that time is not linear. So
time is not linear. Nothing is linear. Honestly,
we
so
just
why would
experience
time
it that
be?
way.
Yeah, exactly.
Lines are linear.
That's it.
I'm just going to say, if I draw a line, it's linear. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
I was just disputing your claim that nothing is linear.
Yes, linear equations exist. I'll say that.
Okay.
If you say so.
So, but some of my favorite stories have to do with time travel. I mean, they're not all actually that exciting. They're just cool. I interviewed a guy from Springfield, Missouri, and he was at a gas station, putting gas in his pickup, and a guy, he said he was wearing a suit, but it wasn't a normal suit. It was a suit, and he was a big guy. And he was bald, and he walks out of his convenience store, and he just screams at him, "What year is this?" And the guy's like freaking out. He's like, "Okay, well, first he's not freaking out. First he's like, okay, whatever, dude. It's 2008."
Mm-hmm.
But then the guy his face gets red, and he gets more angry, and he just starts screaming at him about, that's not the year. What year is it?
Mm.
And this guy started to get kind of nervous. He finishes, with his gas. He paid with a credit card, so he didn't have to go in. So he just goes to get in his truck, and he looks in the rearview mirror, and the dude's gone.
Yeah.
And he gets out of his truck again, and there's really no place for the guy to have gone except for inside the store, and there was nobody in the store except for the clerk and some teenage kid buying, whatever teenage kids buy. But I mean, I've got a lot of stories like that, which are, is that a time traveler, or is that just somebody kind of nuts?
Well, we had an author on the show a couple years ago, and she had worked as an RN for a long time. And part of what she wrote about are some of the experiences that she had seen and witnessed regarding paranormal activity and so forth, working with people in hospitals. And she had an experience with someone that was brought in a suspected suicide attempt, if I remember right, but had been found, and he was like nude and unconscious and so forth, and they didn't know whether the guy was going to make it, but they couldn't really figure out what was wrong with him. And he was unconscious for 2 or 3 days, if I remember her saying. And she was in the room when literally he just opened his eyes, looked at her, and of course you would think, where am I? What's going on? That kind of thing. He just looked at her calmly and said, "What year is this?" And she told him, and he just kind of shook his head. And she said that he ended up walking out of the hospital without being released, and no one ever knew what happened to him. And said that she had encountered similar other stories like that happening, of people showing up at hospitals, and it was almost like they were from a different time.
Yeah, RNC, all sorts of weird shit. They really do.
Yeah,
they sure do.
But she said, I can't say that he had traveled through time, but she said there was nothing that made her think he was nuts or hallucinating or anything like that. And even her telling it, and it had been years before, you could just hear in her voice that it really affected her. So
it's interesting.
It really does make you wonder. Well, we've really had a good conversation, Jason. Is there anything that you want to throw in, or be sure and let listeners know how they can get a hold of your writing, your books, get a hold of you if they've got interesting stories to tell, etc.?
Well, as for getting a hold of my books, they're all on everything's on my website. How to get a hold of me, how to get a hold of my books, and it's at jasonoffutt.com. JASONOFFUTT.com. I've also got a blog on there. I usually write about, writing advice, things of that nature. Occasionally, I'll post something like I posted, maybe a month ago in Stephen King and George R. Martin were having a conversation. I posted that. The most interesting thing out of that was Martin asking King how he writes everything so damn fast.
I did see that.
Yeah, it was nice. But anyway, yeah, you can get all my books there. Again, get a hold of me. All my contact information is there, and a bunch of other fun stuff, like links to radio programs like this one, which will be going on. Going up there when it's posted. My books are also available at Amazon. I've got books of the paranormal. I wrote a guidebook, a travel guidebook from Missouri to Canada. I was on my quest for Canadian beer, which is a funny travel log. We discussed this one before. A parody guidebook on how to kill monsters that wander into your house.
And I have to highly recommend that book. It is, for anyone who wants to read it. It's great. It's a fun read and just a great read.
So yeah. Anyway, all of that stuff is on there. Thank you for the kind words. There are links to blogs that I've had in the past that I don't update anymore. But one of the blogs is From the Shadows, and I have 4.5 years of true stories of the paranormal. If you want to peruse those, listeners, there are ghost stories, Bigfoot, one of a golem, black-eyed kids. I started writing about that stuff before they became popular. Lots of other cool stuff. So yeah, just check it out. And if you've got a story for me, don't hesitate to email me.
Well, and I encourage anyone who does to get a hold of Jason, and because he really is an encyclopedia with all this kind of information, especially things in the Midwest. And he's been a great spokesman for paranormal research in this area. And you can catch Jason on some of the TV shows on the History Channel, etc. at times, talking about different things. So do check him out, and I'm sure we will be talking again on who knows what. But we thank everyone for tuning in, and Jason, I sure appreciate you sharing with us.
Hey, no problem. Anytime you want to have me on, I'd love to be on. I always love to be on with you guys.
Well, and I appreciate that compliment too. Thank you, everybody, and
it was nice meeting you.
Yes, I think this is Kathy's first time
with
you being on with Jason.
Yeah, I believe so as well. Yes.
So we will definitely be talking again. Jason, hold on just a second as we sign off with the audience. And but everyone, we sure am glad you're listening in, and we've got several more podcasts coming up in the next couple of weeks that look to be very interesting, and hope to have you back.